Matteo, would you start, please?
Yes, okay. So welcome everyone to this session. My name is Matteo Icardi. I am assistant professor at the University of Nottingham. You can see behind me. So it's a great pleasure to be the moderator of this session for this invited lecture of Bernd Flemisch. So before introducing Bernd and his talk, I just want to remind you a few things. So first of all, a couple of events that will happen later today. So we will have the career development event at 5 p.m. Local European time, and at 6 p.m. the scientific writing seminar. So I already suggested my students to attend, so please do the same. And then I want to remind you that you can ask questions for this session using the Whova web app or your mobile app. So you can just write the whole question, and at the end I will collect the questions and read them. And if time allows, I could ask for more questions. But the sooner you ask, of course, the more likely is that your question will be chosen. Okay, and so after this introduction, one last reminder, any recording of filming is prohibited. InterPore is already recording this session. They will be available later. Okay, so now we are ready to start. I was saying it's a great pleasure to be the moderator of this session because Bernd has been a very active member of InterPore and of the porous-media community, and I'm very happy to say that his computational achievements, particularly in open source software, are really important for the whole community. So I'm very glad that the community is finally recognizing researchers like Bernd. So Bernd is a mathematician originally. So he studied in Germany and then in the US, in Iowa State University. Then he started working in University of Stuttgart, where he became associate professor at the Department of Hydromechanics and Modeling of Hydro Systems. So working with engineers. And so his research, of course, deals with the computational modeling of porous media flows. And he's been the main developer of the simulator Dumux, the open source simulator, which is now many of you know. So with this, I don't want to take more time, and I'll pass to Bernd. Thanks, Bernd, for your presentation. Thanks.
So thank you very much, Matteo, and let me instantly share my screen. So you should see my browser now, and you should now see my presentation. So thanks again, Matteo, for the kind introduction, and thank you, InterPore committees, for selecting me to give an invited lecture. I feel very much appreciated. And thanks to everyone involved in the organization of this nice event in this special time. So as usual, I'm merely presenting the hard work that others did, which in this case is particularly Timo Koch and also Dennis Gläser and also Martin Schneider and Kilian Weishaupt. So I want to start off with a motivating example, which is a question asked by within a survey of the Nature Publishing Group a few years ago, which is there a reproducibility crisis? Approximately 1,500 scientists across all disciplines answered, and more than half answered yes, there is a significant crisis. Close to 40% answered yes, there is a slight crisis. And only about 10% answered either I don't know or there is no crisis. So this shows the size of the problem that we are potentially into. So as I said, this is across all disciplines. So when we look a bit closer into computational science or science where we use computations at least, there have been efforts already in the 1990s that originated from Stanford, from John Claerbout, who's a geophysicist, so he should be well known to some people here in the audience. And around him, there evolved a group of people, Sergei Fomel, Victoria Stodden, and they coined the term reproducible research. And at the core is that an article about computational science in a scientific publication is not the scholarship itself, it is merely advertising of the scholarship. So the actual scholarship is the complete software development environment and the complete set of instructions that generate the figures. And in this talk, I'm going to show you how we hopefully can reach that that complete software development environment, and in particular how we can make this accessible to our scientific peers. So what are the particular questions and challenges in the reproduction of simulation results? So as usual in programming and software engineering, the main problems come from dependencies. So code that we develop is often developed in application modules that depend on something. So they very often depend on a base framework, which is in my case Dune, but it might be Phoenix or OpenFOAM or whatever base framework you are potentially using for your application. And then there are possibly many third-party libraries. You might be using a direct solver from SweetSparse. You might be using MPI communication routines and so on. And those dependencies make reproduction so hard. So the question that I want to answer is how to archive and possibly publish code and its environment such that I myself am able to reproduce the results. So for example, once I submit a paper and I get back the reviews and I should change something in the figures, I want to go effortlessly to the back to the stage where I produce the results for the initial paper submission. And also I want to possibly give others, so my scientific peers, the possibility to not only inspect the code, but also to reproduce and compare results transparently. And that comes due to the dependencies mostly with a couple of problems. So I might forget about local changes on my computer that I did not push into the repository. Versions of libraries and code base, they change continuously. I might be working in a rather big framework, so it's very difficult to see which part of the code have actually been used. Comparison with reference data may be cumbersome, and I do not care about, or I did not care about usability for others until this very point when I want to probably publish something. So in this talk, I want to show up a few solution paths that are concerned with the work that we do in this research project that is listed down here, together with people from the central infrastructure in Stuttgart. So in particular, we look at people that develop software, which are down here in orange, and they want to connect to the other groups that are listed here, so to the scientific peers or in general to potential users of our framework. And I want to, in the first main part, I want to focus more on the code. So I want to show you on how to come from a local executable to a web application. While in the second part, I want to focus a bit more on the data and look at how to compare with reference data. So I want to make a case study that is based on a recent benchmark paper that we submitted and that is currently still under review, where we proposed 4 benchmark cases for evaluating spatial discretization methods for discrete fracture matrix approaches. They are of increasing geometrical complexity that you see on the right. So we did this in a completely open process by putting out a call for participation to the community. We compare in this paper 17 spatial discretization methods that have been submitted by 26 participants from 17 institutions. We compare usually by plots over line. The requirement was that all the result data for these plots is uploaded to a public Git repository. Most groups use open source software as a basis. Several of them also released the application code. And for example, we also participated in the study and took our porous-media simulator Dumux for running the cases. So that just a very brief background on Dumux. Dumux is a simulator for flow transport and porous deformation processes in and around porous media. It's based on Dune, which is a C++ toolbox for the grid-based solution of partial differential equations. And Dumux is, or our expertise here in Dumux is that we make computational models for non-isothermal multi-phase multi-component models, and also that we can couple models of different physics dimensions and also domains, which comes in here with the dimensions as we couple matrix flow to fracture flow and transport. So when I want to submit a paper or I have written a thesis, I usually have a local executable that gives me the desired computational result. So the question is now, how do I make that available to myself in the future and potentially also to the public, such that that I have not much effort in reproducing the result? So, and there are 3 steps or also results that that are of increased reusability for potential users. Step 1 is that I generate and provide an application module that contains the source code. Step 2 is that I provide a Docker image, and step 3 would be that I provide a complete web application. And our goal here is that we want to automate and facilitate all those 3 steps, and I will highlight that in this talk. So the first step of generating an application module containing the source code, we follow this already for about 5 years in a group-wide project that we call Dumux Pub. So every publication and student thesis that uses code has to get a table in that pub, and the table is a Git repository that is hosted on our public GitLab instance that includes all the source code and data to reproduce the results, is itself a regular Dune module, and contains an install script to install the dependencies in the correct version. And so there are mainly 2 scripts that hopefully automate the generation of such an application module. They are currently shell, but they are transformed to Python. There's an extract module path script that creates out of an existing potentially bigger Dune module, a fresh Dune module that contains hopefully only the data and code that is necessary to reproduce the results. And we have a make install script that actually creates an install script to get all the libraries and dependencies in their correct versions. So looking at Dumux Pub, this is just the GitLab group page here, so I can browse or look for the publication. So we have here concerning this benchmark study, we have that pub module that you see here. So this is just some Git repository container that you see here. So the file list, and then the pub modules are supposed to come with some sort of documentation. So you see for here, for example, an overview, you see installation instructions, and you also see execution instructions. So that's the let's say first step that we aim to provide for each publication. So it turns out that this is not enough to ensure reproducibility, because if I go ahead and want to use such a pub module from maybe 5 years now ago, from 2015, I'm pretty sure that my at least initial efforts will fail, because operating systems have changed, compilers have changed, so dependencies have changed. So our aim to facilitate this further is to really store the complete software stack, including the operating system, in the form of a Docker image. And again, we want to automate this. We have a Python script for this that takes the application module that I generated and uses the install script and puts that application module together with the dependencies into a Docker image that is based on Fusion, which is a minimal Ubuntu image adapted to be used in Docker containers. It configures and builds everything from source, and it adds instructions on how to spin up the container based on the Docker image. And now the nice thing is that once I have produced the image with hopefully not too much effort, I can upload that to GitLab's container registry. So I'm just moving back to that Dumux pub module, and I see here on the left there's an entry package and registries, and going to container registry, I see that, okay, there's this Docker image that I can download with that URL that you see briefly depicted here. So that gets rid of dependency hell, so to say. I freezed all the dependencies. So so as long as Docker exists, I will be able to execute that Docker image and hopefully to reproduce the results. Still, this might be cumbersome. So Dumux is a very big package. There's a lot of C++ code in there, which I possibly don't want to deal with. And as soon as things fail in, for example, compiling things or running things, I'm lost. For, let's say, inexperienced users or our scientific peers that really are not too much interested in the details of the code, they are just interested in reproducing the results, we do again one step further and try to generate or ease the way to generate a web application. So we published a new module that is called Dumux Web App. So this was developed by James Hartill and Timo Koch. So which works in terms of a backend that is running ultimately on some web server, and a front end that is also running on some web server ultimately, but that is accessible then via the browser. So the backend uses a Python-based web framework, Flask, and the front end uses a JavaScript library, which is called React. And now if I want to connect my Docker container that I generated in the last step to that web application, or I want to generate a web application, I have to provide 4 or 3 simple, in some sense, simple files that connect the container to the web application. And in those files, I also have to tell on what output I expect from the container and what I want to do with that output. So the deployment locally here is rather easy. So you need some libraries to make this work, but that is, as I said, it's a few lines of command line instructions. Web deployment is more involved, so this is still ongoing. We are hopefully shortly before the breakthrough, but unfortunately this is not yet online. So I'm showing you this just briefly locally, how this will then look like in the browser. So you can, for example, here select a benchmark case. You see the description of the benchmark. You can set some parameters, so change the number of cells here, for example, change the discretization scheme, and then you can run the simulation. So here you see the simulation output. And whenever you see blue lines, that's when the backend sends some output files to the front end. And I see, for example, some one-dimensional output here that is updated as the simulation processes and is producing more result files. And I also get the possibility to visualize VTK output files. So for example, I can look at the tracer concentration here and see how the tracer concentration evolves over time. So
you have 3 more minutes.
Yes, thanks, Mattia. So that will bring me to the second part, which I will address very briefly, which is the comparison with reference data. And obviously, instead of storing whole containers that reproduce results, it might still be difficult to actually reproduce them or expensive. So another option is to provide the data itself. So this provision should follow fair data principles, so findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. We should at least upload the metadata to a well-suited data repository. And even then, if the data is available, it might still be cumbersome to be compared with. And one possibility to facilitate a comparison is provided by so-called Jupyter notebooks. So data repositories, the number is exploding. So we have at this website here, which registers data repositories, there are 2,500 repositories listed. We don't have that unique one in our field of research. So what I would recommend is you might experience that at your university, more and more universities host institutional repositories. In Stuttgart, there's one that is called Darus that has been established last years. And the nice thing here is that it enables you to share private research data with selected peers or also with anonymous referees by providing links during the review process. And so this is just some screenshots of a data set. I will not go into detail here. For the actual comparison with data, you can also try to facilitate that. And what we are used for this benchmark study here is we provide Jupyter notebooks. So Jupyter is an open source web application that allows to share documents containing editable and executable code. And that runs locally, of course, but there are services like Binder that build Jupyter-enable containers from Git repository and offer you online access. So for example, if I turn to my result data repository here, this is the GitLab repository, I can launch a binder. So this is live, so it might possibly not work, but let's see. We wait for a couple of seconds, and then so this can take a bit of time, but it gives you then direct online access to the data and to manipulating the data in the Jupyter notebook. And let me just jump to the local version here. So we provide a notebook where you can just compare your method here. So for example, if I did a simulation here, this is now on my local desktop, I can I have produced some results. I can just bring the results in the right format here, and I will just copy and paste those results. So this is a bit of a long list, but it's essentially 2 vectors. Book. No. And execute that. and now run the Jupyter notebook, and you see here now your result, which is in orange, compared with the spread of reference results. Okay, so that was very quick in the end. I'm sorry about that. So that brings me now to the summary. So simulation results should be reproducible by default. I mean, there are always excuses, but our default should really be to make them reproducible. And that will only be the case if we facilitate that for the scientists. So I showed you how to automate the way from a local executable to a reusable web application. How we facilitate a comparison of data for verification and validation, and I used the recent benchmark studies. So open questions here are obviously, how do we get from this proof of concept showcase that I presented you to an easily adaptable workflow for, at first, all Dumux users. So this we try within the project that I mentioned on a, let's say, a small scale. But also we want to reach out to the broader scientific community. So we are currently in Germany building up a national research data infrastructure. And I'm responsible for the task area engineering research software in one of the consortia that you see here, and where we try to address exactly the topics that I mentioned. And one big question is, what is if your simulations depend on the architecture, if you need some huge compute cluster to actually come up with your solution. So then reproduction really becomes complicated. And with that, I'd like to close and thank you very much for your attention.
Many thanks, Bernd, for your talk. It was very interesting and inspiring, I think. So I didn't stop you because I could not see questions yet. So I thought it was better to let you finish. So we have a few minutes, though, for questions now. I cannot see questions at the moment in the chat. I'm not sure if I'm looking in the right place. But in the meantime, I do have actually quite a lot of questions. But the main one is that I think your talk was really inspiring in the sense that it really shows how full reproducibility is possible. But you have to consider you are a very big group, and you have a specific, software that also is being built, somehow for the purpose. And the other problem is also, the scientific community that might not be exactly ready, editors, journals. So can you comment a little bit on how to make this, more, to convince people to show the benefits of this to the kind of smaller groups and also to journals and editors?
Yes, I mean that this is really the big issue here, right? I mean, we do it, and there are many other groups that do it, but compared to the whole scientific community, this is still a very low percentage. So the only way to get everybody doing it is that it has to be rewarding. So if it has to be rewarding, journals have to acknowledge that this is really part of the whole publication process. So if you publish something that is based on computational results, you should be you should be able to make the process transparent. I'm not necessarily talking about making everything open source, but you should at least yourself have a clear picture on how you achieved your results. And even if you don't want to open that up to the full public, you should have that back in your hands and potentially be able to present it. But this demands recognition for actual software development. It it demands recognition for providing data sets or for creating data sets and all that. So as you said, we have to make the journals and also the founding organizations more aware of that. I think they are aware of that, but they are not implementing it probably enough. And for example, the DFG, they have some recent rules on safeguarding good scientific practice, and there they treat very much software and also research data, and they those rules they have come into place last year, and now universities have to do something about them, and well, let's see how that works out. But I think we are in a very dynamic situation here, and things are improving. And the other thing is that we have to assist smaller groups and individuals, as you say. So it has to be made easy for them, and for this I put my hope into initiatives like this NFDE for Ink, for example, or in general the National Research Data Infrastructure. So that individuals will really receive help, and first of all also education to become aware of things.
Many thanks, Bernd. I think also this talk probably will help to raise awareness of this within the community. So we had two questions, but unfortunately we are now running over time. So one was about what to do with supercomputing centers, and also what to do with scientists that cannot or do not want to share entirely the code. I think you partially already addressed this, so I would suggest to continue the discussion in the chat, and you can of course contact Bernd through the app. And I sincerely hope as well that this topic will continue to be a main topic in the next few years. So with this, I want to thank again the speaker, and we have to unfortunately close the session here. Thanks the speaker, thanks to all attendees, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.